Hey everybody, it's Jork. Welcome back. Hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world. Today, I wanted to hit on a topic, much like this thumbnail and the title suggests, philosophically wanting to get some opinions from you and talk through about thinking about where you may want to retire to in another country and thinking maybe past the idea of going where it's cheapest and thinking more about where you can afford to age and live a long time, hopefully a very robust and healthy retirement, and maybe a little less focus on, well, where's the cheapest place that I can go? Because often when you see publications and you see your social media feed, when you look at the countries that get listed, and this is over the last 20, 30 years as the places to retire to, when you look at the countries themselves, often people that live and work in those countries couldn't necessarily retire and have the same type of lifestyle that you as an immigrant moving to their country are able to enjoy. Not always, but I think that there's from our time in Portugal, I think that definitely stands to be true. And I think other countries that are high on retirement lists check that box. But with that, we often are thinking about, how do we conserve our retirement nest egg? And, where's our money going to go the farthest, the longest? And when we were thinking about when we moved to Portugal and we were thinking about where retirement will be in another, let's say, 5 to 7 years, it's on our mind of, if we were to go someplace else, what country would that be? And having already lived in another country, it gives us some great perspective on maybe pros and cons. But from your end of things, I want to know what you are thinking about or have thought about when you are looking to move. How much of it went into like the cost of living aspect versus other things? Again, this is just a philosophical discussion, but I think it's good to get comments from you so that others can see as they're watching the video what the thought process is when they're looking to move somewhere. For us, it's never about the cheapest. It's what works with our lifestyle and whatnot. Things that I think you should pay attention to. And I'm just going to quickly hit on these because I don't want to make a long video that you have to race through and to kind of fast forward to get to certain points. First thing I think is inflation abroad. You have inflation kind of in your country, so you're used to kind of maybe the fluctuations and where things are, but also taking into consideration what is the inflation in the country that you're moving to and keeping that in mind and how does that pace with what you have in retirement and what you're withdrawing and making sure that things are aligned there. Along those lines is currency. And I don't mean like you're going to move to a country, there's a revolution, and then it's a new currency. Not that. But there have been, in the last 5 to 7 years, let's say people that have moved from North America to Europe. Some countries have adopted the euro, so that can change perspective, and there might be issues with hyperinflation, but also just changing the currency. It's more from my end thinking philosophically of transferring money and that exchange rate as well as what the currency how that rates with what your currency is, up or down, how that fluctuates, and when do you transfer money. If I assume that over time you're going to transfer money from, let's say, pension, retirement savings, and whatnot to a new country. Just trying to be mindful of that, the fees involved, and the conversion. Hopefully it's going in a good way for you. Maybe it's not. But depending on where you move to, it does impact not the first year, not the first 6 months, but if you're 5, 10, 20 years someplace, that transfer of money does add up. So just philosophically, again, keeping that in mind. Third thing is healthcare later in life. As I keep harping, and I make mention of this in many videos about, you're always the healthiest when you see this, but down the road we're all going to have issues, is trying to really put a thought into not the affordable healthcare, because often coming from America, we look abroad for affordable healthcare options. I think there's a stark and a big contrast between affordable and quality healthcare. I'm not making a judgment of the system here in the US, but I will say that affordable doesn't always mean great healthcare. Affordable means it's okay, but it's not fantastic. Doing a deep dive into, you most likely will have issues in another country. Hospital stays, surgery, a chronic illness, something of that nature. No different than if you were living in your home country. Thinking about, okay, well, it's got cheap and affordable health care. As soon as I hear affordable health care, I automatically in my head say cheap. It's not good. Now that's my problem to deal with, because that's not always the case. But if affordable and quality went together as two terms, and it's affordable and it's really good quality health care, that's another thing to consider, and I would think of it differently. But as we are looking for a place to be, and where we've been, it's more, what's the quality of the healthcare? Yes, most places outside the US, one could say is affordable or more affordable. But the butt of that is not always quality doesn't come in line in every case there. So thinking through of, we're going to move to Portugal, Panama, Malaysia, Italy. What is the healthcare setup? And when we're there, what are the options from, let's say, a public perspective, a social service perspective, and a private perspective? And there isn't a ton of information online to be able to find reviews and good hospitals and bad ones, and good doctors and bad ones, but trying to do as much diligence as possible to say, okay, if we're here and 7 years down the road I have a heart attack, what's the impact of that? Just on my lifestyle, finances, and things like that. Am I getting quality care? I don't necessarily need affordable. I need quality. Affordable would be nice, but I kind of want to live after the procedure too. That's kind of important. Lastly, and again, I'm not a financial person, so there's no advice going on here. This is something that comes up often, that we talked about when we were living overseas and talking to everyone else was retired. And there was this constant theme about, are we going to outlive our savings? And there was a big worry about that. Part of it is what I just talked about. If we have a healthcare scare, if it was a couple, okay, let's say we both have an issue and we're dealing with it, and how quickly, savings and things like that and retirement goes up in smoke potentially if we have lots of issues. Even if it is affordable over time, depending on the issue, it can eat up your nest egg. And that's something that it's a hard one to think about, because you don't want to think about death. I think the goal is you're always hoping that there's enough in a retirement system, whether you have retirement savings, you are in a job, or you're coming from a country where a pension exists. Are we going to have enough that's going to take care of us? And when I mean that, not just to have life, but have quality of life. Going back to, it's cheap enough for us to live and be okay, but is it a place that we can have a quality life? And that is completely subjective, because you have 10 people in a room, you're going to get 10 different opinions on that. But I think that's really something that, as you're thinking about questions of where to be and what goes on, often, cheapest and affordable is at top of mind. And I get that, because it's a component of what we're thinking about too. But the thing about quality and having a quality rest of your life versus the cheapest rest of your life, I think is very important. And it's just something that, as you're looking at millions of things and considering all kinds of options of where to be and what goes into that, I'm just hoping that with this video you can add these few things to the list if you haven't thought about that, to think about getting past just the affordable point and the cheapest, and just trying to focus, if you can afford to, what the quality of the rest of your life will look like in that new country. As always, thank you so much for watching and enjoy your travels.